Welcome back to Friday Night Frights. It's your host, Lord Byron. Tonight we're going to be reading from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 3. Tonight's story is going to be a good one. It is called Like the Cat Eyes. As Jim Brand lay down dying, his wife left him with his nurse and went to the next room to rest. She sat back in the dark, staring into the night. Suddenly, Mrs. Brand saw headlights come rapidly down the driveway. Oh no, she thought, I don't want visitors now. Who wants visitors in a time like that? But it wasn't the car bringing a visitor. It was an old hearse. There may be a half a dozen small men hanging from the sides. At least, that's what it looked like. The hearse screeched to a stop. The men jumped off, staring at her, their eyes glowing with a soft yellow light, like cat's eyes. She watched with horror as they disappeared into the house. An instant later, they were back lifting something into the house. They drove off at high speed. Wheels squealing in the driveway and dust flying in all directions. At that moment, the nurse came in to say that Jim Brand has died. Poor Jim Brand. This chapter is called On the Edge. You will say that these stories could not happen. Yes, some say they did happen. Look at that artwork. Beautiful, isn't it not? And the story is called Bess. John Nichols raised horses. He had many horses of all kinds. His favorite was Bess, an old mare he had grown up with. He no longer rode her, for she had grown up. For she could do now was just amble along. Bess spent her days gazing peacefully into a meadow. That summer, for the fun of it, John Nichols went into a fortune teller's booth. Stay away from fortune tellers. You might not want to hear what they have to say. The fortune teller studied her cards. I see danger ahead of you, she said. Your favorite horse will cause you to die. I don't know when, but it will happen. It is in the cards. John Nichols laughed. The idea that Bess could cause him death was nonsense. She was as dangerous as a bowl of soup. I've seen people choke to death on soup. Yet, from then on, whenever he saw her, he remembered the fortune teller's warning. That fall, a farmer from the other end of the county asked if he could have Bess. He had been thinking that the old horse would be perfect for his children to ride. "That's a good idea," John said. "It would be fun for them. It would give Bess something to do besides stare into the meadow." Later, John told his wife about it. "Now Bess won't kill me," he said, and they both laughed. A few months later, he saw the farmer who had taken her. "How's my Bess?" he asked. "Oh, she was fine for a while," the farmer said. "The children loved her. Then she got sick. I had to shoot her to put her out of her misery. It was a shame." Despite himself, John breathed a sigh of relief. He had often wondered if in some crazy way, through some strange accident, Bess would kill him. Now, of course, she could not. "I'd like to see her," said John, "just to say goodbye. She was my favorite." The bones of the old dead horse were in the far corner of the man's farm. John kneeled down and patted Bess' sun-bleached skull. Then a rattlesnake, which had made its home inside the skull, sank its fangs into John Nichols' arm and killed him. It wasn't Bess that killed him, it was the snake. Gosh. That fortune teller, that's why you never go into the booths, because they tell you stuff, and it doesn't necessarily mean what it's supposed to mean. It said the horse was going to kill him, but the horse didn't kill him, the horse was dead, right? It was the snake that killed him. What a liar, I want my money back. This next one is called Harold. When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to cool green pastures in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months, and they brought them down to the valley again. The work was very easy, but oh, was it boring. Until the cows come home, that's what the term comes from. All day the men tended the cows. At night, they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper. They worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. He said, "Well, let's order pizza." Just kidding. "Let's make a doll size of a man," he said. "It would be fun, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It would look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was an old farmer that they both hated. They made the doll out of old sacks stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. They added dark hair and a twisted frown. And of course, they also gave him Harold's name. They named him Chuck. Each morning on the way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden and scared away the birds. Each night they brought him inside so they wouldn't get ruined if it had rained. They were feeling playful and they would talk to him. One might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" And the other, making believe he was Harold, was answering in a crazy voice, "Very slowly, as vegetables do." They would both laugh, but not Harold. He had no sense of humor. However, whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, they would kick him and punch him. Sometimes one would even take the food that they were eating, which they were sick of, and smear it in the doll's face. That's not very nice, is it? Wasting food like that. "Wow, how did you like the stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you better eat it or else." Then the two men would howl in laughter. However, you howl in laughter. One night after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with the food, Harold grunted. Imagine, Harold, a doll, grunting. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "Well, you better call Ripley's if you can't believe it or not." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas, "and that will be that." Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." That doesn't sound like a very wise choice, does it? So they left Harold sitting in the corner of the hut, and they didn't talk about him or take him outside anymore. And now and then the dog grunted, but that was all. After a few days, you decided it was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside of Harold and were making those noises. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they had put Harold in the garden, and each night they brought him back in the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him badly as ever. One night Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold is growing," he said. "I think the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our imagination." Alfred replied, "We have been up here on this mountain too long." I agree. When you start hearing stuff like that, it's been too long. The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut and climbed upon the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on his hind legs. That would have been a sight to see. All day and all night long, he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in the far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid, as they very well should be. And they decided to take the cows down to the valley the same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt that they had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. When they had gone a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. Forget it, I would have left the stools. You can make another one. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. What? You can't use a tree stump? There's really nothing to be afraid of, they told one another. After all, what could a doll do? Don't ask that question. There are plenty of haunted dolls out there, and that be the truth. They drew straws, no pun intended, to which one would go back. It was Thomas. I'll catch up with you, he said, and Alfred walked down the valley. When Alfred came to the rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas, but he did not see him anywhere. But all he did see was Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. Alfred watched. Harold kneeled, stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. Don't ever make fun of a doll, especially an effigy of somebody like Guy Fawkes, for all you folks in London. So, there you have it. Scary stories and more tales to chill your bones. 3 by Alvin Schwartz and drawings by Stephen Kamau. Very good books, aren't they? Good reading, aren't they? And I must say, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of Friday Night Frights, but has a different name tonight. For my friend Ace Rimmer wanted to call it Saturday Night Screams, just in honor of it being on a Saturday. So thank you, Ace. Hats off to you. Saturday Night Screams it is. Thank you for letting me use the name. And remember, always look over your shoulder as you walk into a dark room. Turn on the light. Always walk with your right foot forward. Step into a room with your right foot. You spill salt with your right hand. Pick it up and rub it in your eyes for being an idiot. This has been Saturday Night Screams. Sweet dreams, my children. And we'll see you next week for Friday Night Frights.